Hidden treasures in 1980s, pop music. The 1980s represented a seismic shift in popular music, a decade where technological innovation collided with creative ambition to produce some of the most enduring sounds in modern history. While the era gave us iconic albums from Madonna, Michael Jackson, Prince, and countless others, there exists a parallel universe of recordings that never saw the light of day, the lost tapes of the 1980s pop explosion. These forgotten sessions, abandoned projects, and unreleased gems offer a fascinating glimpse into the creative process of an era defined by excess, experimentation, and extraordinary musical diversity. The technology revolution and its casualties. The 1980s marked the transition from analog to digital recording, creating a unique environment where artists could experiment more freely than ever before. The proliferation of synthesizers, drum machines, and multi-track recording equipment meant that musicians could layer sounds, create entire productions in home studios, and iterate on ideas with unprecedented ease. However, this technological freedom also led to an explosion of recorded material that far exceeded what could realistically be released. Record labels, still operating under traditional business models, were often conservative about what they deemed commercially viable. As a result, countless hours of material were shelved, sometimes indefinitely. Artists who were given generous studio budgets often recorded far more than what could fit on a standard vinyl LP, leading to difficult decisions about what to include on official releases. The emergence of the compact disc later in the decade provided more storage capacity, but by then, many projects had already been completed and archived. Prince, the Vault Master. Perhaps no artist better exemplifies the phenomenon of lost 1980s recordings than Prince. His legendary vault at Paisley Park is rumored to contain thousands of unreleased tracks from the decade, representing an almost incomprehensible level of creative output. During the 1980s, Prince was known to record multiple songs per week, often completing entire albums that were never released. Projects like The Flesh and Moonbeam Levels remain largely unheard, while albums such as Dream Factory and Camille were restructured or abandoned entirely in favor of what became Sign of the Times. The few Prince Vault recordings that have surfaced over the years reveal an artist constantly pushing boundaries, experimenting with different sounds, personas, and musical directions. These lost tapes show Prince not just as a perfectionist, but as an artist whose creative process was so rapid and prolific that even his official discography represents only a fraction of his true output during this transformative decade. Madonna's Metamorphosis Sessions. Madonna's rise to superstardom in the 1980s was carefully orchestrated, but behind the scenes, her recording sessions produced far more material than what appeared on her breakthrough albums. Working with producers like Jellybean Benitez and later Stephen Bray, Madonna recorded numerous tracks that explored different musical directions, from pure dance pop to more experimental sonic territories. Several unreleased tracks from the Like a Virgin and True Blue sessions have surfaced over the years, revealing an artist grappling with her evolving image and sound. These lost recordings show Madonna experimenting with different vocal styles, lyrical approaches, and production techniques that would later influence her work in the 1990s. The unreleased material from this period demonstrates that even her most calculated career moves were built upon extensive experimentation and creative exploration. The New Wave Underground. While major stars like Prince and Madonna dominated headlines, the new wave and post-punk movements of the early 1980s generated an enormous amount of unreleased material. Bands like Duran Duran, Depeche Mode, and New Order were incredibly productive during this period, often recording multiple versions of songs and exploring sonic territories that wouldn't be fully realized until years later. Depeche Mode's sessions for Speak and Spell and A Broken Frame produced numerous instrumental pieces and alternative vocal takes that showcase the band's evolution from pop synthesizer group to the darker, more complex sound they would become known for. Similarly, New Order's post-Joy Division recordings from the early 1980s include experimental pieces that bridge their punk origins with the dance music they would later champion. Many smaller new wave bands recorded extensively during the 1980s. but were unable to secure proper distribution for their material. The independent music scene was thriving, but the infrastructure for releasing and promoting alternative music was still developing. As a result, countless recordings by bands who were influential within their local scenes remain largely unknown to broader audiences. R&B and hip-hop's hidden history. The explosion of hip-hop culture in the 1980s created a parallel recording universe that operated largely outside the mainstream music industry. Early hip-hop artists were constantly creating new material, recording over existing tracks, and developing the techniques that would define the genre. Many of these early recordings were never properly archived or released, existing only as demo tapes or recordings made for local radio stations. Similarly, R&B artists working in the shadow of superstars like Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston produced extraordinary amounts of material that never received proper release. The competitive nature of the R&B market meant that record labels were extremely selective about what they released, often shelving entire albums in favor of projects they deemed more commercially viable. The home recording revolution. The democratization of recording technology in the 1980s meant that artists could create professional quality recordings outside of traditional studio environments. 4-track cassette recorders and affordable synthesizers allowed musicians to develop their ideas at home, leading to a proliferation of demo recordings and experimental pieces that were never intended for official release. Many established artists used home recording as a way to explore ideas before entering expensive professional studios. These home recordings often capture a raw energy and experimental spirit that was sometimes lost in the more polished final versions. For emerging artists, home recording provided the only viable means of creating professional-sounding demos, leading to a vast archive of unreleased material from artists who never achieved commercial success. The digital archaeology movement. In recent years, dedicated fans and music historians have begun the painstaking work of cataloging and preserving these lost recordings. The internet has facilitated the sharing of rare material, while streaming services have begun to recognize the commercial value of unreleased archives. Estate administrators for deceased artists have increasingly turned to vault material as a way to satisfy fan demand while generating new revenue streams. However, the process of releasing lost material from the 1980s faces numerous challenges. Master tapes may have deteriorated, legal ownership can be complex, and the original artists or their estates may have specific visions for how their unreleased material should be presented. Additionally, the context in which this material was created, as experiments, demos, or abandoned projects, raises questions about whether it was ever intended for public consumption. Legacy and influence. The lost tapes of the 1980s represent more than just historical curiosities. They provide crucial insight into the creative process during one of popular music's most innovative periods. These recordings reveal the extent to which the decade's biggest stars were willing to experiment and take risks, often in ways that their official discographies don't fully capture. As technology continues to evolve and music consumption becomes increasingly democratized, the lessons learned from the 1980s vault recordings become more relevant than ever. They remind us that creativity is often messy, non-linear, and far more prolific than what eventually reaches the public. The lost tapes of the 1980s pop explosion serve as a testament to an era when artistic ambition knew no bounds, and when the possibilities seemed truly limitless.